Hello, this is Justin Williams with the Wolfpacker Podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by editor of the Wolfpacker.com and fellow co-host Matt Carter. But that's not it. We got another man in store for you today. It's staff writer at the Wolfpacker.com, Ethan McDowell. And yeah, three-man podcast today. We got everybody out for the podcast because that's how big of a game this is. Number 5, Clemson hosting number 10, NC State. First matchup between two ranked teams in the top 10 in NC State Wolfpack football history. So, game day is going to be in Clemson. You're going to have the ABC coverage in prime time. You're going to have Herbie on the call. Hopefully no favoritism to his sons that play at Clemson. That might be a topic of discussion on the message boards, but we'll get into all that good stuff during this podcast. Big matchup. I don't have to explain it to the listeners, but before we jump into the analysis, some quick reminders for the listeners and viewers at home. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us, Apple, Spotify, Google Play. You can also watch us on YouTube. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel while you're at it and give this video a thumbs up. We're on social media. You can follow our main account at the Wolfpacker. You can follow me personally on Twitter at Justin H. Will, and give Ethan a follow at Ethan McDowell. I'm pulling up Twitter just to make sure that is indeed his handle. Ethan, feel free to chime in if I got that incorrect. I'm not looking if you are giving a thumbs up here, but and Ethan M. McDowell. That's right, Ethan M. McDowell on Twitter. We're on Facebook too, NC State Wolfpack on the Wolfpacker.com. Last but not least, sign up for a special deal for just $1. You get a year's worth of premium subscription to the Wolfpacker.com as part of the On3 network. All the premium NC State athletic news and information, recruiting intel, access to the message boards. It's a great deal. I mean, it's $1. You can't get anything for $1 anymore. You go to the grocery store, you're in the candy aisle. You can't get a Hershey's chocolate bar for less than $1, but you can get a year's premium subscription to the Wolfpacker.com. You can be an informed NC State fan, and isn't that worth a whole lot more than just $1? So anyways, sign up for that deal. It'll take you through the Textile Bowl next year, most likely. I have not looked at the 2023 schedule yet. I don't think that date has been released, but assuming NC State plays Clemson early on next year, it'll take you through the Clemson game next year. All right, let's start talking some football, because I felt a little scatterbrained there, but I think a lot of NC State fans are feeling a little scatterbrained this week and maybe looking ahead to their weekend plans. It's hard to focus on work during the week just when you think about this top 10 matchup and whatever's going on in Matt Carter's background in the Coleman Publishing headquarters. But Matt, I'll throw it to you first, or maybe I should throw it to Ethan if it's loud back there. But just initial thoughts on this game. I'll throw it to Ethan first, because Matt, something's going on in your background. But Ethan, this is your first year on the NC State football beat, not your first rodeo in terms of watching ACC football, but I think it's probably a little different for you because you're not used to how kind of odd of a position this is for the Wolfpack in terms of, again, we said it earlier on, it's the first top 10 matchup for NC State in its program's history in football. So just from your view, Ethan, is this a little sooner than expected? What's your perspective going into this game? Are you going down to Clemson this Saturday? And just your thoughts entering this huge blockbuster matchup.
Yeah, so last year, months before I even thought I'd be covering NC State football, probably the most fun I had watching a college football game last year was last year's Clemson-NC State game. It was an instant classic, and I love to see that upset. And as soon as I joined the Wolfpacker and I looked ahead to the schedule, this is obviously the game. It's a big game for Clemson, and it's a game for NC State where they can really, really kind of just jump onto the national stage. For any doubters that are out there about NC State now, if they go down to Clemson, they stop what I believe is the nation's longest home winning streak and teetering on a record long home winning. They can disrupt that. There's no denying that NC State has arrived. It's hard to kind of understate the potential stakes this game could have for the NC State program. And it's hard not to get excited about that, even from like a journalist point of view. This is the type of games you want to cover when you get into this profession. And I am going down there. Matt and I are going to drive down there Friday, and I'm really excited for that. I've heard many great things about the atmosphere in Clemson. Game day is going to help with that even more, and it's super exciting. And I mean, the season so far is set up pretty well for it. I mean, both teams took care of business in the non-conference schedule. NC State looked shaky at times, but they're 4-0, and the last couple games should give NC State fans a little more confidence. And Clemson fans should definitely be encouraged by the way DJ threw the ball last week. So it's really exciting. It looks like a top 10 matchup since, of course it is, but both teams look like two top 10 caliber teams, and I'm really excited for it.
Well, I gotta admit, Ethan, I'm jealous of you guys this weekend. I would love to be there with you in Death Valley. Although the weather, we'll get to the weather, but it might be a hurricane game. I have experienced an NC State hurricane game. I was a student when NC State hosted the Fighting Irish, and Brian Kelly decided, hey, it's a good idea to throw the ball 20 plus times in hurricane wind and rain, and NC State ended up winning that game. But yeah, I thought you hit a lot of great points there. Matt, I'm going to turn to you as the more experienced scribe on the NC State beat. You're going on 2 decades here and longer than that of being an NC State fan and follower. I'm thinking back in I'm 25 years old. I can't remember a bigger football game for NC State than this one. And I mean, I'm no historian, but I mean, let's face it, the history of NC State football has been solid, good football, but it has never been on the biggest national stage. This is a rare phenomenon for NC State to be in a featured primetime national game of the week, game day coming to Clemson. Matt, is it fair to call this the biggest game in NC State football history?
Well, hopefully the background noise isn't too loud. I think it's the fan in the office. Justin and Ethan been in this office. They know the fan can get a little loud and annoying. I'll add to the anticipation. They are debuting the Pat McAfee alternate telecast for this game. So not only do you have Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit on ABC, you can go to ESPN2 and watch Pat McAfee and his friends broadcast the game as well. So first time. So it's getting the double network treatment.
I got to say, big fan of that programming decision from ESPN. Love the idea. Not going to start watching it this weekend though. Too big of a game. Maybe next week.
Yeah. So, to answer your question, is it the biggest game as far as I can remember? In 2002, they actually just beat Clemson decisively in Death Valley. They got into the top 10 of the polls. People were starting to realize, NC State could win out. I think they were 8-0 at that point, and Georgia Tech came to town, and I was reminded this week listening to local radio of, I remember the opening theme. They had Chuck Amato with his Corvette riding around the Beltline in Raleigh with the Sopranos theme playing in the background as he drives up to Carter Finley. They were kind of mocking the Sopranos opening credits for those who have seen they're not mocking, but and for those who have seen it, they end up losing that game. Unfortunately, they led the whole game against Georgia Tech. A couple weird things happened. End up losing it. It was very deflating. Then they lost to Virginia in a rainstorm the next week, and then lost to Maryland, who was Phillip Rivers' nemesis for 4 years. Never beat Maryland. And then end of the year beating Florida State and crushing Notre Dame in the Gator Bowl. That's the closest that comes, but that Georgia Tech team was good, but not top 5. And it wasn't on the road. And there wasn't there were expectations, but not like this year's preseason expectations for NC State. So, yeah, First ever top 10 matchup. I don't know if there were some games, and the White Shoes team. I can't remember that 1967 or 69. I believe it was 67. They got up to number 2 or 3 in the country and played at Penn State. And I know they lost on a goal line stand. I don't think Penn State, though, was ranked that high at the time. And also that was pre-social media and television broadcasting every game. So that was a totally different era. It means far less excitement, I'm sure, than what's going on Saturday. But I can't wait to talk about the weather either. So let me know when you're ready for me to break out my weather geekness. And
all right, I think we should just jump right into it. I mean, I texted Matt earlier this week. In fact, it might have been yesterday. We record this on Wednesdays. I think it's posted on Thursdays. But I asked, is there a chance that this game gets postponed just due to the weather? Because you're seeing some of the schools in Florida move their games location-wise. I don't know if any of it been postponed date-wise. I know that South Florida's game was moved, if I'm not mistaken. I think they're playing ECU, but besides the point. Hurricanes coming through the southeast. It's that time of the year, tail end of the hurricane season. What should we expect, Matt Carter? You teased that you have meteorologist Matt Carter over here for the weather segment of the Wolfpacker podcast. How strong will the hurricane conditions be on Saturday? Is this going to be like back in, was it 2016 or 2017 when State hosted
16.
Notre Dame? 16. Okay. I was there. I'm sure some of our listeners were there. That was the first time that I've ever experienced rain that hurt because the wind was blowing so hard in that game that the rain was just coming down sideways. And, I mean, it was a torrential downpour the entire game, all 4 quarters, even leading up to the game and pregame. So should we expect conditions like that, Matt, or is it just going to be pretty rainy?
It won't be like that. That was like the peak of that hurricane. It was Hurricane Matthew. Hello. That came through, and it actually made landfall that morning or overnight, I believe. And the peak of it coming through Raleigh was right at kickoff for NC State Notre Dame. And but that hurricane had traveled less land, still had a little bit of a punch left to it when it gets to Raleigh, so it was still breezy. Obviously, Justin can tell you. And I remember all the Notre Dame press people freaking out because of the lights were shaking above Carter Finley Stadium. I remember leaving the stadium and none of the lights were on. None of the stoplights were running, and there was a tree down in front of the Murphy Center. So they probably shouldn't have played that game that day.
Probably not.
Probably not. But it was a lot of fun in hindsight. I think the good news is as we're recording this podcast, well, the bad news is it's terrible, by the way, for Florida. So I'm not trying to make light of anything. I just saw a camera of the storm surge in Fort Myers. It's pretty, very powerful stuff going on down there. But it is moving faster than anticipated. And the latest track suggests that college game day might be a fiasco in the morning. But by the time it gets to kickoff, I'm cautiously optimistic and hopeful that a lot of the heaviest rain will be out of the way by the time we get close to kickoff. That the heaviest wind will be gone. And even then, the hurricane will be significantly weaker because it had traveled over the state of Florida and through the Carolinas. It's going to be tropical depression level winds at that point. So, but I do think that plays a significant factor. If it's wet, and Ethan can chime in if he agrees or disagrees, I think it favors Clemson if it's a wet game. That's my opinion. I think if it's a rainy, similar to Hurricane Matthew type game, that favors Clemson. That's just my opinion.
I'm completely with you there, Matt. I mean, one of the biggest revelations for DJ so far this season is he has been a really productive runner. And if they're and you have Will Shipley in the backfield too, who NC State fans are familiar with from his days in high school. But if offenses are essentially reduced down to read options or design QB runs or just handing the ball off, that favors Clemson. I don't see much of a way that NC State would have an advantage from that. And DJ would probably be the biggest factor in that game if it came down to it, because I think Devin Leary is, top tier quarterback in the ACC, but he's not exactly what you'd call a dual threat guy. So I think that would definitely favor Clemson.
I disagree with both of you guys. I texted Matt yesterday that I think that the weather will benefit the Pack, simply because it's going to make Clemson's offense a lot more one-sided. Look, we saw Uiagalelei able to throw the rock in Winston-Salem last week. Even in the best conditions, I don't expect him to have that type of production through the air against this NC State defense. But, through 4 games, what has been the strength of this NC State defense? It's been well-rounded. It's been good in pass coverage and against the run, but it's really good against the run. And, look, it's going to have its toughest test yet against a Clemson team with the best running backs this NC State defense has seen this season, and the best offensive line this NC State team has seen this season so far, not to mention, you already mentioned it, Ethan Uiagalelei's ability to run the ball. But, do you really want to have, if you're a Clemson fan, you want to have your season on the line against this NC State run defense? We'll see. Maybe they say yes, but I've got all the confidence in NC State's front 6, front 7, and I just think they'll be able to stop the run, rain or shine. And if you take away the ability to throw the rock, I think NC State wants to win a rock fight, because you look at NC State on the offensive side of the ball, they've had their struggles through 4 weeks, just like Clemson has. And if it's rainy but not windy, I still think you can get the pass game going a little bit. You can get Thayer Thomas on some underneath routes. I think it's got to be a big Thayer Thomas game. You got to feed Thayer, rain or shine. If it's 20, 25 mile per hour winds, maybe you're not throwing the ball as much, but he's going to be the best option in these short pass game type completion opportunities. And here's another factor: if it's rainy, that's when special teams becomes a really, really huge factor. And, I'm not doubting Clemson's ability to be a good special teams program. I think they're fine. But as we know, NC State is one of the stronger programs in terms of special teams, being able to block punts, have a great kicker. I just think that the elements will play into NC State's favor. And if it's super rainy, we'll see how long those Clemson fans can last in Death Valley, in terms of, you're going to be expecting a prime time road night game in one of the best environments in college football if it's a beautiful night. But if it's gross out there, how long are these 18, 19, 20-year-old fans going to stay out there? We're not talking about the same crop of college student sections like we were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I'd say it's probably still full house, but this is the TikTok generation, guys. There's probably going to be a good half of that student section that's like, do we really want to be out here struggling through 3 hours of rain, torrential downfall, when we could, maybe just, go back to the frat houses or whatever and party for the second half indoors? We'll see. I think Clemson's going to be pretty solid in terms of the fan element, but I think the hurricane conditions could maybe take away some of that home field advantage. I don't know if I said anything that you guys agree with there.
I think Clemson fans will show up regardless. I think they're a different breed, different culture down there with their football. But you bring up a good point. I think it'd be very hard for both teams to move the football if it's raining and windy, which is, I think, an important distinction. If it's not windy, you can still try to do some things throwing the football. You've got to be very cautious about it and very realistic about it. You shouldn't be trying to throw the ball 30 yards downfield, right? But short passing game could be very realistic for you. We know Devin Leary can be accurate. And we know Thayer Thomas, I think you bring up a good point. We know he's sure-handed. He's about as sure-handed as you get. You see it when he catches punch. He's a real good asset in a game like that. My worry is Clemson's run defense is outstanding too. And they got probably the best defensive line in maybe the country. Even without, sure didn't seem like Javier Thomas was going to play based on some of those early reports in his own words. But, they still have a lot of weapons. And I think one thing that's different about this game is Tyler Davis didn't play last year. This is all Clemson against Wake Forest. Tyler Davis is a very disruptive force, a defensive tackle. Brian Breesy got hurt towards ACL against NC State last year during the game, so he was not on the field at the end of the game. So this is a different Clemson defensive line and a better Clemson defensive line. I kind of, I'm more with Ethan. You take away, if you make it a one-dimensional game, you need multiple threats to run the ball in the backfield to run the football. Otherwise, they're just going to key off on Demi Sumo or Jordan Houston. I remember that Notre Dame game, they didn't score, but the one time NC State drove the football the length of the field was when they took Ryan Finley out and put Jalen McClendon in. And now Notre Dame suddenly had to account for both Matt Days and Jalen McClendon in the game, and that made a huge difference. Of course, I think they got stopped on fourth down. I mean, they had to try to go for it at your own 20-yard line, even though that's normally a field goal kick. And then I'll kind of lastly add before I turn it over to Ethan. Very good job on DJ's last name, Justin. I know you're just trying to say that over and over to prove that you know how to pronounce his name, and you can just get it to roll off your tongue like that. So well done.
As soon as his name became a household name, I just practiced it. It's not that. It's DJ Uiagalelei and Giannis Antetokounmpo. We're in the biz, man.
See, that's why he's in TV, Ethan, and we're riding.
But I think he's going to become even more of a household name because I've been a huge fan of his since he was a highly touted recruit coming out of California. And I always thought he had the tools to just be an incredible quarterback. And I was a little bummed when he kind of underperformed at Clemson last year. But watching him in that Wake Forest game, he looked incredible. And I think that might have been him turning the corner a little bit. And we might start to talk about him as the 5-star, top 50 recruit, I believe he was, coming out of high school. So a little tangent on DJ there. Again, apologies for the pronunciation issue. But as far as the fans go, yeah, I think Clemson's just different. I think it's going to be an awesome atmosphere no matter how it goes. And as far as the weather playing the NC State's advantage, one point I do agree on, Justin, is you said that when it's raining, as long as it's not windy, you can still get the passing game going a little bit. And one thing that was encouraging against UConn, I thought, was how they used the screen game. And they did that a little in the prior games also. But they got Keon Sane pretty involved early in some swing pass situations and screens. And he looked pretty good on that. He was able to get some good yards after catch. Daryl Jones, I believe, has had a couple of nice screen plays. And then, of course, you have Thayer Thomas, who has shown an ability to get good yards after the catch as well. So if they can do that against Clemson and we just kind of hammer that, it's a lot of kind of spreading the field with those short screens to the sidelines. And then, then you get your Demi Sumo up the middle, you get stuff like that going. Then maybe you could have a nice little balanced offense going there. But I just don't think I'd be very surprised if the first play of the game is a deep shot to Thayer Thomas down the sideline.
Yeah, probably not the same play call that you're dialing up against that UConn defense. That you're probably not going with the same approach against Clemson, that defense on the road in prime time. I will admit with the rain, I lean NC State edge. You guys say Clemson gets the edge with the rain. Where I will agree is, watching that Clemson Wake Forest game last Saturday, before I even was aware that the hurricane was going to be a factor in this game. We lost Ethan. Hopefully he rejoins here soon. Matt, I'll have you look out for him to rejoin the pod here. But what I was going to say is, I thought my analysis for this game was going to be really simple before the hurricane got involved. And it is, can Devin Leary take advantage of this young Clemson secondary? Can he – because that seems to be Clemson's definite weakness. Welcome back, Ethan. Definite weakness on defense is that young secondary. They're very skilled up front. They're a very good run defense. But we were able to see that Wake Forest was – I mean, Sam Hartman had the game of his career thus far, and he's had a pretty darn good career in Winston-Salem. What did he throw, 5-6 touchdowns? I mean, 6. I know he had his career high, threw for over 400 yards. So, that Clemson secondary is out there for the taking if the conditions match up to that. So, I think it's advantage both defenses if the rain becomes a factor. I think it's going to benefit NC State's defense. I think it's going to benefit Clemson's defense. I give NC State the edge in terms of special teams. But, the one area that I'd say maybe you don't want to see too much rain as a Wolfpack fan is that was a potential mismatch that NC State was going to be able to take advantage of. And maybe they still can if it's just raining but it's not that windy, is can Devin Leary and this receiving core take advantage of that Clemson secondary? Yeah. Anything to add to that before we turn our conversation to the spread and the over-under and just kind of making –
a couple of thoughts too. We talked a lot about the rain. I think we can do that. What if the rain had moved out, right? Let's say good conditions, field is in good shape, and it's a fair, even, square matchup. I think you hit on what the key is for NC State, which is to take advantage of the secondary. It was a short-handed secondary against Wake Forest. That was a young secondary against Wake Forest, and Wake Forest is not a team you want to be throwing a young secondary against for two reasons. One, Wake Forest has a great receiving core, maybe the best in the ACC, and they got maybe the best quarterback, in the ACC. He's certainly in the conversation with Sam Hartman, throwing them the football. So that alone is challenging. Then you add to it the nature of the offense with the slow mess, which can freeze a corner, and they really love to throw deep vertically out of that. And so they put a lot of challenge, particularly because Clemson liked to play press coverage on those corners, and they just weren't ready for that. Not many corners are. You have to be really disciplined. You really need some experience against it. And, Clemson started giving some help, playing more zone, putting some safeties in there. That slowed it down. But then what happened? Wake Forest all of a sudden found some room to run the football in the fourth quarter. But you're right. Can NC State take advantage of that in the passing game? It's not the same offense. All due respect, NC State that hasn't proven they have the receiving core that Wake Forest has. At least not yet. Secondly, on the other side of the football, a lot has been made about Clemson's improvement. It's the second most points they've ever scored through 4 games of the year. But as I noted in scouting Clemson, I do think you have to put a caveat of who they have played into that conversation. Now, Wake Forest is not a good defense. It's better than last year's Wake Forest defense, but that Wake Forest defense was terrible. They played Furman, who's in the FCS. They played Georgia Tech, who's ranked, I think, 101st in yards per game allowed. And they played Louisiana Tech, who's ranked well below Georgia Tech in yards per game allowed. So we may not know everything about Clemson's offense. Maybe it's legit, but it could have also been a little bit of a byproduct of the schedule. I think we're going to learn a lot about both teams. I know a lot of people nationally are like, we're going to learn a lot about NC State. Are they for real? Yada, yada, yada. We're going to learn a lot about Clemson, too, particularly on offense. Is that the improvement that DJ is showing, is that a byproduct of the schedule, or is that legit? Can he do it against a top-flight defense like NC State? I go back to last year. I felt for DJ last year because I think he kind of got thrown into a no-win situation. The receiving core was not up to Clemson standards last year. The offensive line was struggling at the beginning of the year. And oh, by the way, who did he start the season against? Georgia, and that NFL defense. And then in week 4, he plays at NC State and a top 10, 15 caliber defense. And his confidence got shot. So, good for Clemson, forcing that the schedule set up much better this year. But we're going to learn a lot about Clemson's offense. So they're kind of if the game is played in fair conditions and we remove all the weather elements from it, then it becomes a game of, can NC State throw the football on the secondary? Can NC State contain Clemson's running game and kind of make them one-dimensional? They're very balanced on offense, and DJ's very hard to tackle. He's shown that a couple times. And then lastly, can NC State avoid mistakes? That's kind of something they have not done a great job of this year. A lot of pre-snap penalties. Twice fumbling the ball on the way to the end zone. Can they avoid those mistakes in that environment? Can the offensive linemen be disciplined not to commit penalties when they can't hear the snap count and they got to go to a silent count? All those type of things. How are they going to handle that? That'll be big too. But that's just my synopsis. If it's a fair weather game.
Well, let's turn it over to Vegas and just paint the picture for how the bookmakers see this game. We talked about it a little bit on the Post Game Reflections podcast on Sunday, Matt. After the UConn win, NC State opened up as a 7.5-point dog going to Clemson. The over/under was set at 43.5. Those numbers have changed since over the past few days. NC State is now a 6.5-point underdog, Clemson being favored by 6.5. And the over/under total has dropped down to an even 40, most likely due to the hurricane conditions coming to Death Valley. I think I mentioned it on the podcast on Sunday, but if I didn't, I was thinking it. It's like you might want to go ahead and – we initially liked the over just in terms of ideal conditions, but as soon as you heard that hurricane was coming, you might want to go ahead and take that under while you can because you knew it was going to drop. Ethan, I'm going to throw it to you since we haven't heard from you in a while and you had some – you left us for a second there, but thankfully you're back now. What do you make of the 6.5-point spread? Do you think you think that's spot on, right on the money, or do you think there's an edge to be had here?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, sorry about the audio issues. Glad I got those fixed. But I think the spread's about right. I think I'm definitely at this point. It's automatic 3 points in Clemson's favor, and I think that's entirely fair. And I think it has to be close enough that I don't think the conditions are going to let it be a blowout in any direction. So I think keeping it under a touchdown is smart. I'd honestly, I'm biased, but I'd take NC State there. I think it could. I'm currently have my prediction in for it to be about a 3 or 4 point game in favor of Clemson. I'll go and about that website tomorrow. But so I think the spread's about good. As far as the over/under goes, I think these are two really good teams, and they'll find a way to both it up. I think I'm going to have it around like a 21-17 game. So for the people hoping to bet, it doesn't help much since that hasn't the total right at 38 points. But I would, with the weather trending as well, I think I would drift towards taking the over here because if the conditions end up being good, I think these teams will be able to score some points.
Matt, do you see it similarly?
I think the spread is pretty much right on. If you paid the buck for the site, you already know what my initial score was. Now, that score was weather being fair. If the weather is fair, I would hammer the over, by the way.
Yeah. All you need is, 6 touchdowns? That's it?
Yeah. Can you do that, like, now? Or, I mean, is it locked in? I've never placed a bet, So get locked in when you.
Well, technically, Matt, sports gambling is not legal in the state of North Carolina.
That's why I've never.
But if you have a buddy that lives up in Virginia and could run over to the local casino, or I believe online sports gambling is legal in Virginia, so you could have them log into their FanDuel account or whatever. Yeah, you could absolutely go ahead and take the over on 40 points. And if you really wanted to get frisky with it, this is probably bad gambling advice, because you never, ever, ever want to tease a college football game, because college football can be so random, and the odds makers, they have it down to an exact science in the NFL. It's not exactly the same in college football. There's just so much uncertainties out there in the game of college football. You don't really want to tease it, but this might be an opportunity to tease where, for those that aren't familiar with a teaser, that's when you can adjust a spread by 6 points by stacking 2 picks together. Both of them have to hit for your bet to win, but you could tease NC State up to a 12.5 point underdog. And if you wanted to take the over, you could make the over-under total 34 points. So if both of those hit, NC State loses by 12 points or less, and the over-under goes over, or the points total goes over 34 points, then that tease would hit. Maybe something to look at there. Maybe something to look at there. This is one of those games that, as somebody that has some, emotions involved in the game, I don't want to have any dollars on it. I just want to enjoy the game as it is, because you never want to have that feeling of oh well, the outcome I wanted happened, but my bet didn't hit, so now I feel kind of half and half. Just might want to just enjoy this game. But
that's why I got out of fantasy football. I got tired of having to pull for Tom Brady, because Tom Brady's on my team, when I pretty much dislike everything about Tom Brady being my quarterback. Sorry to Ethan. I know Ethan's in Boston. That's probably blasphemy up there, but I don't think Ethan cares that much. But
not a Patriots guy? Okay.
He's a Miami Dolphins guy. Yeah, he probably agrees with me on Tom Brady, right?
100%.
Okay, yeah. See, so, but
Ethan, we won't talk too much fantasy football here. But Ethan, maybe you can help me here. As a Dolphins fan, should I start Tua in fantasy this week? Is he okay?
I say go for it.
Okay, all right. That's enough fantasy football talk.
Let me ask this: if NC State wins, where are they in the polls next week?
I say they take Clemson's spot. Put them 5.
Think they go all the way up to 5? All right.
I gotta see who's in front of NC State. I got let me pull this up. All right. Well, they're not. So, I mean, who's Kentucky playing? The teams in front of NC State right now that NC State could potentially leap over, assuming the top 4 win. Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan. They win. They're not passing any of those teams. So that means Clemson would probably be the first team you're thinking they could pass. Then you got USC at 6, Kentucky at 7, Tennessee 8, Oklahoma State 9. Does anybody know who Kentucky or Tennessee plays off the top of their head?
Kentucky has a huge game at Ole Miss, who's ranked 14th.
Okay.
Oklahoma State has a big game at Baylor, who's ranked 16th.
Yeah.
I think Tennessee is the one that has the light game this week, but they may not even be playing this week.
Okay.
Let me.
Yeah, I don't see Tennessee on
they're not playing this week.
On the docket here.
They may be a victim of idleness.
Let's see, what about USC?
I think they got Stanford, maybe.
Yeah.
No, they have Arizona State. Arizona State at home. Herm Edwards just got fired. That's an automatic W for USC.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be honest. I'm going to base my prediction on how the poll voters typically handle these things. Okay, so if NC State beats Clemson, they're gonna jump over Clemson. They're not going to jump USC because USC media darlings. Nobody, even if NC State beats Clemson, they're probably still going to think USC is a better team until USC gets a loss. Kentucky, if they win that game on the road at Ole Miss, hard to make the argument that NC State passes Kentucky, because Kentucky's resume to this point would still be superior to NC State's. Tennessee bye week, that's an opportunity. You could skip over them. And then Oklahoma State at Baylor. Ooh, that's tough. That's tough. Maybe I'll say either Oklahoma State loses or Kentucky loses. So they'll jump over one of them. They'll jump over Tennessee, and they'll jump over Clemson. So that would be 1, 2, 3 spots. They'd be the number 7 team in the country with a win.
I agree. I think a lot depends on Kentucky and Oklahoma State. I kind of agree. I think they would probably skip Oklahoma State, but I will go 6 or 7 in that range.
So you think so? State and Oklahoma State win. You think State skips over Oklahoma State?
It'd be close. That would be a second loss for Baylor, and so I don't know if that influences things a little bit.
Yeah.
Still a road game, but that would be a second loss for Baylor. I'm not sure. Oklahoma State so far has beaten Central Michigan, Arizona State, and Arkansas Pine Bluff. So, you got to figure in NC State's win against Texas Tech might count. Let's say Texas Tech beats Kansas State this weekend on the road. Kansas State's ranked now. Maybe they got a hangover from beating Oklahoma.
And Texas Tech would be ranked.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you're like, So I would think if they win 6 or 7 in that range. Ethan's optimistic.
I'm sorry to burst your bubble there. It's your first year on the NC State beat. I mean, look, but so many good things can happen to NC State at one time. To catapult into the top 5 after this win, do I agree that maybe they deserve it? Absolutely. But just with these voters, the way they pay attention, no. I 6 or 7, probably best case scenario. Important to note, though, Kentucky, Oklahoma State, both underdogs on Saturday. Oklahoma State's a 2-point dog at Baylor, and Kentucky's a 7-point dog down in Oxford. So, that's 3 underdogs in the top 10 this week. So could be some parity in college football, but last thing, do they move College Game Day to Little John if it's too rainy? Is that an option?
I would think they have to. I think the conditions are going to be worst around that time. It depends on how windy it is, I imagine. But for lightning, what have you. All I know is Ethan and I are doing the smart thing and going to drive down Friday night. Got a hotel in Greenville. Maybe we'll hit up a Waffle House or an IHOP in the morning. Walk our way down there to like old time shake in college, and or Bojangles or something like that. And
now you're talking.
I made the mistake of not booking a hotel with a continental breakfast. Sorry about that, Ethan. So.
It's okay. You're in the South. There's a lot better breakfast options than whatever's going to be offered at the Continental Breakfast. Definitely agree. Bojangles in the morning. Waffle House is the post game move. So
That's a good point.
You go to Waffle House after you're done with the recap. It's going to be probably midnight, 1 o'clock. You're probably still going to be wired from that game because the environment's going to be electric. Nobody's going to sleep as soon as they hit the hotel. So go get yourself an all-star special after the game. That'll do the trick. Put you right to sleep afterwards. Yeah, hopefully you have a hotel Saturday night too.
Yeah, we do. We definitely do. So okay. I'm looking at the noon game to see if Ethan and I will agree on what game to watch at noon on TV. So that might be another battle that we'll have to figure out.
Kentucky Ole Miss. Boom. There you go. Kentucky Ole Miss. Unless you want to watch Michigan Iowa.
Maybe Louisville Boston College. What do you think, Ethan?
I'm good on that one.
It's I will say it's kind of liberating to branch out from the ACC environment. You know, it's like I don't really need to watch this Boston College, you know, Louisville game unless it's really just the only thing on. But okay, last thing. It sounds, Ethan, you said you already teased it. We're gonna have the official predictions out. You guys post that tomorrow, right?
Yep.
Thursday, yeah.
Okay, so this podcast will be coming out at the same time, basically, as your game predictions. So we can go ahead and lay them out there. Ethan, it sounds like you have Clemson winning by 4. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have 21-17 Clemson right now. Adjust it however you want, but I think a 4-point margin of victory sounds about right to me. If it's going to rain, like we've talked about it at length, I think DJ has the advantage as a dual-threat quarterback. I think he's a very productive runner. And he's shown he can make the difficult throws this season. So I think putting all that together, I think they have a slight advantage under what is the current projected weather conditions. If it ends up being nice weather, then maybe I would switch that, maybe a little like NC State by 3 or something like that. I am very optimistic about NC State's chances in this game. I just think Death Valley, that environment, and the weather combine for what I think is going to be a very close NC State ball.
Matt?
If it's fair weather, I have Clemson winning 30-21, I think. If it's a wet game, I would reduce that to say maybe 21-17, something similar to what Ethan said. You know, if you add wind into it, if it's just like a total, or maybe it's one of those games where you can't move the ball going one way because the wind, and sometimes that happens, you know. And that could be like an X factor. If the wind is blowing at the beginning of the game and say NC State or Clemson is going against the wind and they lose a quarter of offense and then the wind dies down. I mean, that's something that one of those small details that can make a big difference. But I kind of like, I've been doing this a long time, and this is not a game NC State has won a lot over the years. And that's probably why I'm hesitant to pick NC State. I know this is an older group, a veteran group. It's what they came back for. They certainly are confident they can beat Clemson because they did beat Clemson. There was nothing fluky about it last year, by the way. Ethan, you saw it. Justin, you covered it. There was nothing if anything, Clemson was the lucky one that it went to overtime because State missed a bunch of field goals and had a turnover in Clemson territory. So, yeah, NC State should have every reason in the world to believe they can win it, but it's hard to pick them when this has not been a game they have won over the years. Those big ACC winning moments, you know, they just have not made them a lot, and so I feel like I'd be bucking history. And so until they do it, I'm going to pick Clemson.
I hear you. I think both of you have very reasonable approaches to this game. Logic would suggest you're probably right. But I said it in the season preview. Said it last weekend. I've been saying it all year. It's my bold prediction this year. NC State's going to go down to Death Valley and come back to Raleigh with a W. Move on to 5-0. Climb up the rankings to number 6 or 7, depending on how some of those games go in the top 10. And it's going to head on to week 6 with an interesting matchup at home. Florida State comes to town. Could be a ranked Florida State team by that point. NC State, are they ranked yet? Florida State?
Yep.
They're ranked.
Oh, excuse
23rd.
me. 23rd. Okay, so Florida State wins this weekend. NC could be another ranked matchup next weekend in Carter Finley, but does it matter? NC State by 1, NC State by 7, NC State by 14. It doesn't matter as long as they win. And my prediction is correct. So I don't have a point total for you. I think this game will be somewhere around the 21-17 range. I like that pick. But yeah, give me the Wolfpack. I just think it's NC State's year. If you look at the way, Clemson beating Wake Forest last weekend, it's pretty much a must-have if you want to win the ACC Atlantic this year. I mean, NC State's not completely out of it with the loss, but then Clemson would have basically a 2-game advantage on both Wake Forest and NC State. Throughout the rest of the season, Clemson would have to lose twice theoretically for NC State to have an opportunity to come back and win the Atlantic with a loss this Saturday. And I think this veteran group understands the stakes, and I think they're ready to go execute. And I think this might be our cue to wrap up the podcast, because now something's weird is happening on our YouTube stream. So if you're watching us, you see 2 Ethan McDowells, 1 Matt Carter, and 1 Justin Williams. Okay, now we're back to normal.
All right.
But that's gonna wrap up this podcast. I'm gonna wrap it up now that I'm in everybody's good favors. Everybody's listening to this podcast thinking, you know what, Justin is right. I don't. They're definitely not rooting for your predictions. So give me all the smoke. NC State wins this week, and that's gonna do it. Reminders for the listeners and viewers at home. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to us, Apple, Spotify, Google Play. We're also on YouTube, so you can watch us. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment while you're at it. And follow us on social media. Main account is at the Wolfpacker on Twitter. You can give me a follow at Justin H. Will. And give Ethan McDowell a follow as well at Ethan M. McDowell on Twitter. NC State Wolfpack on the Wolfpacker.com. Give us a like on Facebook. And last but not least, take advantage of that special deal. For just $1, you get a year's premium subscription to the Wolfpacker.com as part of the On3 network. All of the premium insider information, everything related to NC State athletics, recruiting, unlocks the message boards, and you get to read everything that Matt and Ethan have to say, which is a lot more valuable than $1. So yeah, that's my plug. If you're not a Wolfpacker.com member by now, come on, what are you doing? If you're a loyal listener to this podcast, you better be a member of the Wolfpacker.com. So take advantage of that deal, and that's going to do it for this podcast. So thank you to Ethan McDowell and Matt Carter for joining today. Good conversation, guys. Have a safe trip down to Clemson. Hopefully you don't run into too much weather. Enjoy that post-game Waffle House. Hopefully it is a victory chocolate chip waffle that you are enjoying at 1 a.m. in Clemson. And I'm Justin Williams. That's going to do it for this Wolfpacker podcast.